My name is Alexandra Suich. I'm the US technology editor for The Economist, and it's such a pleasure to be here with you today. AI is one of the most pressing and interesting issues in technology and society, and I have a really wonderful panel with me here today to discuss the future of AI and what we can expect and how worried we should be. I have Guru Banavar, who's a vice president at IBM, Michael Ferro, who's a data scientist and a chairman of Merrick Ventures, a holding company for technology and media properties. I have Stuart Russell, who's a professor at UC Berkeley and has literally written the textbook on AI. David Siegel with 2 Sigma, an algorithmic hedge fund, and Shivon Zilis, who's a partner at Bloomberg Beta. There's a lot of talk about AI, I think a lot of misinformation. So I think what would be helpful to do is to start with what AI is and whether it's a futuristic concept that we should be worried about 20 years down the line or something that's present in our day-to-day lives. And Shivon, I'll put it to you, which is, what's the framework we should use to think about AI right now, and where is it today?
Sure, so I think one of the reasons it can be confusing when we think about AI is AI really means 2 different and fairly separate things. So on one side, we have artificial general intelligence, and that's basically what sci-fi has taught us to expect and believe. So these very humanoid robots that have human levels of sentience that can kind of do anything. They're superhuman in some ways. And I think that certainly, unless anyone in the crowd is hiding something from me, is in the far future. But then we have this other category, which is narrow artificial intelligence. And so realistically, what we're talking about when we talk about that is this world of learning algorithms. So I tend to use the terms machine learning or machine intelligence just to get a little bit away from this sort of superhuman robot type of world and get more grounded. And so the easiest way to think about what these systems are that are built from learning algorithms is a system that gets more intelligent as it's fed more high quality data. So imagine you're taking Biology 101. The more textbooks you read, the better prepped you're going to be to answer questions on the midterm. And so we talked about one of these 2 things being in the far future. And with the other one, people still sometimes don't think it's here. And I'm going to give you a situation where right now where a picture is literally worth 1,000 words. That usually takes me 1,000 words to explain, hey guys, this is here and now, and you have to start paying attention. So I was wondering if you could throw up slide 1. I think it's the only slide we've got here. Well, I'll tell you what it is. Oh, here it is. So you've got this slide, and your first reaction might be it's overwhelming, and that's kind of by design. So about 2.5 years ago, we were doing a lot of investing. So Bloomberg Beta invests in startups that are transforming the future of work. And the thing we realized is, we were investing a lot more in people who were employing learning algorithms to solve a task. And so we've invested in 25 or so of these companies, but we stepped back and we wondered, gosh, how is this transforming the world already? Is there a framework we can use by which to understand it? And so again, the first thing you should take away from this is, oh my goodness, there's a lot of activity. So you've got all these categories and companies in these categories, and it's a small subset of what's actually happening right now. And in my opinion, and I'm curious to hear what the rest of the panel thinks, we're barely in inning 1 of a 9-inning game, and we already have this much activity. And the second thing I think you should take away from the chart is it's not just the overall amount of activity, but it's the breadth of it. If you take a look at that purple bar over there, we can see machine intelligence companies are already transforming every enterprise function. So the plight of the knowledge worker is changing very quickly. And then down in the green section, we have a subset of industries here, but it's even more than that. It's very early, yet there is no industry that's untouched by machine intelligence to date. So very much here, very much now.
Does everyone agree we're in inning 1? I can't believe a Canadian used a baseball analogy, by the way.
I could say first period. I could say first period, but 9 innings was a little bit more fun.
Does anyone disagree?
Of course, in cricket, we only have 2 innings per side, so being in the first inning could be quite a long way through.
Or a 5-day test match. In which
it's the first over, right?
So you could say, Guru would say it's the first.
After the first quarter, okay.
So who disagrees we're in the earliest of days with this? Does anyone?
So I just want to add something to what Shivon said, which is that machine learning has a lot of the mind share at the moment. But I think we have to remember that, in fact, the kinds of systems that are being built, for example, AlphaGo, which defeated the world champion at Go, is not just a machine learning system. It's using decision-making technologies that involve constructing plans about the future. And that's an equally important part of the field. When you look at what's happening in self-driving cars, for example, There's a learning part which has been trained to recognize lane markers and road signs and pedestrians and so on. But there's also a decision-making component. For what I'm seeing in that industry, it's going to start using some of the same kinds of technologies that AlphaGo uses, again, to make plans into the future. It's really important that our self-driving cars will know that people don't like to be run over. At the moment, they don't know that, and that's one of the reasons why you can't buy them today on the market, is because they don't have enough common sense to handle unexpected situations. And the reason they don't have enough common sense is that they don't have yet a full understanding of how much people dislike being run over, and the ability to project situations forward in time, which is the way that humans handle unexpected situations that they don't already have a pre-computed response for.
Yeah, I would also add that I think that there are a number of things that have occurred in the computing world that are very much related to the kinds of advances that many people give credit to AI. And this would include kind of a class of algorithms that many people refer to as big data. One of the other big changes that has occurred in the last decade or two is that computers have become much faster. Disk space has become remarkably cheap, and you can store absolutely everything. The internet has connected everything together, making it much easier to collect enormous amounts of data. And so with these, let's call them pure technological advances, even without any kind of AI-ish sort of breakthrough, you're going to have computers doing awfully sophisticated things. And so really, in fact, it's probably hard to say what the real advancement has been. I would arguably, I have an AI background, but still I would give most of the credit to the advances that we're seeing today to something as humble as the low-cost disk drive.
So Guru, David mentioned computing power, increasing more data. What else is causing progress in AI to accelerate?
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of things that's causing progress. But I just want to go back to your first question for a minute and then come back to your second question. In terms of what's AI, when Shivon said there's the artificial general intelligence and then there's the task-specific or the narrow intelligence, I also want to say that the goal of AI had been, for many years now, to replicate everything that a human intelligent person, so to speak, can do, right? But that goal is a very far out goal. But there are many other kinds of, let's call it, practical applications of AI that we end up calling, in my part of the industry in IBM, and many of our clients, we call it cognitive computing. And the reason we call it that is because we are building technologies that are not replicating human intelligence, but it's actually complementing human intelligence.
And so what's an example of that?
Example of that is if you want to digest, let's say, all of Medline, which is the database of all medical articles, and you want to use that knowledge to support a decision maker in the healthcare industry. A typical doctor may be 10 years behind in terms of just reading up on all the latest research, but if a machine could do that and support the physician to make a decision for a specific client, that's a machine that's complementing what the doctor does. It's not trying to do exactly what the doctor does, it's complementing it. And that notion is what we call augmenting intelligence, which also, in our parlance, also we call cognitive computing. So coming back to your question about what are the technology advances, I think in the last 5-10 years, we've seen tremendous progress in certain classes of machine learning, deep learning algorithms, and that's caused a major advance. But also, I think in the hardware area, there are many new ways of scaling the performance of these systems using these algorithms and using the huge amount of data that's out there. But by far, the biggest trend that has changed in the last 5 to 10 years is just the availability of data. Everything is digitized, everything is available, and I think because of that, we can automate many tasks that we couldn't do before.
Shivon, did you want to add?
Yeah, and I just wanted to agree with Guru's point that augmented intelligence is really the thing we're seeing, and the way to break that down is human plus machine is greater than either just human or just machine. And the best example we have of that is, the example of freestyle chess. And so this is all rules are free. You can basically play the game of chess any way you want to. You can have a fully automated system. You can have a world chess grandmaster. And the systems that tend to win these competitions are what we call centaurs. So it's some collaboration of a human and a smart system working together. And so that's just one of the examples. Yeah. And we see this over and over and over again in financial services and in various different industries where this team up actually gives you the best result.
I think that, in part, I agree with what you said, but freestyle chess is an example that I've heard brought up frequently. And just for the audience, so as you know, until recently, chess has been dominated by computers. Computers were the undisputed champion in chess. And then more recently, people discovered that pairing up grandmasters with a computer led to a team that would beat the computer. And so the conclusion from that was, aha, this pair-up is really the wave of the future. I don't like to make forward-looking projections here, but I think that the days of freestyle chess, as it's called, being the world champion are numbered. I think that the computers will again dominate, and let me explain why. So when IBM and others worked on computer chess, their objective was to beat the best human player. And as soon as they were able to beat the best human player, IBM and the other people funding this research said, I don't want to spend any more money on it. We've proven our point. And so now, and then they stopped. They didn't really work on making it any better. But now that someone has demonstrated that there's a way to beat the best programs, eventually some deep-pocketed organization is going to spend the money to prove that the computers can win at that game.
Okay, so for our audiences who aren't chess lovers here, what industries are we going to be seeing AI affect that they aren't today? And Michael, I'd love to bring you in. So we hear about self-driving cars, we hear about chess, we hear about Netflix, search, et cetera. What are people not talking about where this is going to make a major impact?
Well, the first place is, I recently gave Watson eyes with my last company, Merge, where 80% of the world does not have access to radiological technologies, the ability to even get a diagnostic done with imaging, with getting an X-ray or an MRI. But it's even more important than that. The reason IBM took our software and how you can use machine learning is that right now around the world, even where the most advanced technology is, a computer scans you, and it's quantitative data going into the computer. And what we've been doing that we still do 100% of the time is we take quantitative data and turn it into qualitative data. That the computer has all this data inside of it, yet we're having a doctor or a radiologist in this case who has to just look at a picture and make a diagnosis. It's completely backwards. When you start applying the simplest algorithms and random sequencing better than what doctors were taught, we've already done tests that show it's a 10x improvement in many cases when you have the computer not telling it, look for an abnormality, not telling it what to look for, where it's not even close. Now, why is this important? 80% of the world, as I said earlier, has no access to any type of diagnostics. And even when they put the hardware in place, they don't have experts to read it. So they have physicians and generalists around the world. If you apply AI, deep learning, quantum computing, who cares what we call it? It's all very similar, to something like healthcare. And something as simple as that, it's hundreds of billions of dollars of value overnight. And so right now I've been working with IBM. That's what Watson is trying to do as we speak today. And that is something where that is not a scary thing. That is a really great use of AI and kind of computing, and that's happening today.
Guru, do you want to talk a little bit more about where else we're going to see within the healthcare space AI making great inroads? A, how long of a time frame is it? And B, is this something that consumers are going to feel the benefits of, or is this something that we're going to see behind the scenes with doctors using?
So just if you want to focus on the healthcare industry, of course, Michael's a lot more involved in this area, so he can also comment on this. But I think every profession that uses knowledge and data for making decisions and discovery can improve tremendously using cognitive computing or AI. The technologies are the same, as you said, right? The technologies are the same at the end of the day, but if you apply it to data that is, let's say, images in the case of radiology, or patient longitudinal data, that is all the tests and results and behaviors that people have gone through over a period of time as a patient medical record, you can apply the same techniques there. But you also need to understand the knowledge that's embedded in textbooks. For every organ, for every condition, for every disease, you would actually need to train,
And this is
right?
where it becomes kind of an interesting thing. So if you have a computer read an image, right, and suddenly the computers are also reading the medical textbooks, right? Well, if the computer can do a diagnosis and then can say, well, this is what we think it is, now it can use all that comparative data.
That's right.
Where this is this, multiplying effect, which using natural language processing, which is what their computer does very well, goes through all the textbooks, knowing it, and then look at all the socio-demographic conditions. It's not just what do you see, but where does this person live, and what type of insurance do they have? What type of funding do they have to fix this? So what are the solutions available based on everything? The environment, their age, everything, their country they're in, what's available resources. So there's simple things where each piece keeps evolving and making it better. It's a multiplier.
How important is owning the data? So if this is if AI is going to affect every industry, will every industry be able to benefit, in fact, or will the rewards and the spoils fall to a small number of companies? Stuart, do you have a view?
So I think the medical example is a good one. Right now, it's very hard to get hold of large amounts of medical data. I tried to do this once with a startup about 10 years ago, and I was told that if I wanted to look at 1% of a data set that an insurance consortium had put together, it would cost me $1 million just to look at it, let alone to buy the 1%. And if I wanted the whole thing, it would be a lot more money. And that's really unfortunate because we are all human beings. What we would like to do to make medicine really work well, to fulfill the vision that Guru and Michael are talking about, is to construct detailed models of how the human body works. It's not just mapping from large data sets to diagnoses. It's really understanding. A doctor understands that blood goes around through your arteries and veins, right? A big data learning system doesn't understand that at all. So the process of constructing detailed physiological models of the human body, how it works, what are all the ways that it goes wrong, what are all the causative factors, what are all the diagnostic symptoms, that requires both a huge engineering effort and access to the largest possible amount of data. And it's really something that, none of us invented our own body. It seems insane that people have this idea that the facts about the human body are proprietary. This is a common human heritage, and it should be available to the whole world.
So an appeal for open sourced healthcare data.
And models and the hopefully the funding to construct them as well.
Okay. I'd like to go back to the question of what other industries that we're not thinking about right now. So beyond healthcare, are there others that you think people aren't paying attention to that AI will significantly affect? Shivon?
I'm happy to chat on what are sort of the less sexy examples of AI. I'll give you one that people don't think about. So I'm so obsessed with all of these other industries that people aren't thinking about that people sometimes call me the unsexy VC, which makes me cry at night a little bit, but it will be okay. But so I want to talk about agriculture because it's one of those examples where we don't necessarily think about data and algorithms being transformative. So I'll give you a couple of tangible examples of how, I'll start with the simplest and go to the most complex. So these are going to include companies both in and outside of our portfolio. First example is solving the problem of when should I water my fields and how much, given the outcome I want as a farmer. And so there's a company called Thule Technologies that has invented a sensor. Sits in the field. Its fancy word is evapotranspiration, but basically it measures how productively the plants are actually using water and transpiring it into the atmosphere. And for a lot of reasons, it was really hard to capture this data historically. So there's been no centralized repository understanding, what happens when you water the field this amount. And so what these guys are doing is they put the sensor in the field, they start gathering data, and the really interesting thing about it is the farmers who use it at the beginning of the season, and this is one of the reasons we invested in this company, is they'd say, hey, we water our fields based on rule of thumb. And then they saw the data coming in, and they're like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I'll use it to inform a decision. And then by the end of the year, the model started getting a little bit more complex. They started learning from all the different fields these sensors were deployed in. And by the end of the season, the farmers were saying, look, unless I knew about this crazy storm system that was coming in, I just listened to what the algorithms told me to water my field at. And so that's the simplest example. We've got other examples. So my colleagues on the panel here were talking a bit about computer vision. And so we're seeing that in agriculture as well. So there are a handful of companies, Siri's, Mavericks, Descartes Labs, and Planet Labs have tried this as well. What they're doing is they're eyes in the sky. So they're looking down at the field. And you can imagine as a farmer, sometimes if you're dealing with tens or hundreds of thousands of acres, it's like, how do I know where things are going wrong? And so these guys are applying computer vision techniques to say, hey, we believe this is an anomalous region of their field. There might be a pipe burst here, or it looks like the pesticides aren't working in this region. And so what they're able to do is just make that entire big problem less complex for a farmer by saying, here, go visit these 10 areas today. And then perhaps the furthest future one is a company called Blue River Technologies. And so what they do right now is they're focusing on a small area. It's lettuce plants, but what's interesting about lettuce plants is, they're visible and they're right at ground level. And so what the system does is it's an autonomous tractor that goes through the field. It's got a camera on the front, looks down at the plant. They've trained up the system to know what a healthy plant looks like, what a plant in distress looks like, and what a plant that just shouldn't exist anymore looks like. And so in real time, the system's able to say, I'm going to leave this one alone. I'm going to apply pesticides to this one, and actually this one's not going to make it. So I'm going to pull it up, and I'm going to use it to fertilize the other plants. And so again, these are just 3 of many examples that are transforming agriculture, and we see it. There's going to be more and more activity here in the future. We're not even in ending one for ag.
Where are we more generally with robots and their interactions with humans? So one area that I think people are very excited about is elderly care, that the lifespans are extending. There's going to be a real need to help care for the elderly. So I think there's an optimistic view that robots will help there. Is that anything that you have given thought to at all?
So I could say a little bit about that. In Japan, this is taken as a given because of the demographic problems they have and also their immigration policies. They have no alternative but to use machines to help with elder care. And so they are, in some ways, more advanced in the US in the development of humanoid robots and in just having experience in how those kinds of robots can work in an unstructured setting with human beings. I would say that their penchant for very, very humanoid female robots is a little bit undesirable.
That's going to be the takeaway from this panel, isn't it?
And I would just let me put in a little pitch for one of my political causes, which actually is to ban highly human-like humanoid robots.
And why?
Well, because I think that we as humans have evolved to, when we see something humanoid, to think of it as a human being. And we're just not equipped in our basic brain apparatus to see something that's perfectly humanoid and not treat it as a human being. And so in some sense, a humanoid robot is lying to us using the lower levels of our brain that we don't get to control.
That happened to me a lot in college with women.
Yeah. I would also say that I think particularly for young children growing up in a household where there are humanoid robots and humans, it could be extremely confusing, and we may even see psychoses developing as a result of machines not behaving as the child expects them to behave because they think they're a human.
David,
I was going to add to that. While I do believe that robotic technology is advancing to the point where it can perhaps supplement these elderly care functions in a meaningful way in the not too distant future, I think the effort to push that forward rapidly may be a little bit odd because really, in my mind, the real concern about advances in AI today is that vast numbers of jobs that us humans have been doing are going to be relatively easily done by algorithms. And something like 30% of all people on this planet are in some way employed by the transportation industry. I think that that's about right. And imagine if self-driving technologies are perfected at a more rapid rate than you might expect. Already, for example, in Australia, mining vehicles are operated by robotic trucks, and there are robotic rail lines transporting the coal. It's not out of the question to imagine in the not too distant future, vast numbers of people will be put out of work in this sector. I mean, if you start to tally up the number, and it really, by the way, I think AI just is a little bit of a misused term, as you may be getting that impression. It's really just automation and computers that are really, and clever programming. I mean, that's what it is. And because of these broad advances, people are losing their jobs in obvious and not so obvious ways. I personally believe that one of the big causes for the stagnation of middle-class wages is essentially because of clever computer programs. I'll give you an example of this, and I wouldn't exactly call it AI, but I think it fits in with what we're talking about. Think about a company like Facebook. So Facebook employs, let's just kind of round the number down, employs about 0 people compared to the number of people using Facebook, which is in the billions.
1.6.
Right? So you have 2 billion people, I'll round that one up. so 2 billion people are using Facebook, which employs approximately 0 workers to provide the service. And these people using Facebook, in some cases, spend, I don't know what the average user is, it could be 10 minutes a day. And so that's an awful lot of services being provided to people by machines.
So I'll give an example, an anecdote about that to your point, David. I recently was working on a story for us about Facebook, and Facebook has set up its own AI lab. It's hired one of the leading minds at NYU, Jan LeCun, to spearhead it. And I said, so where are you seeing the gains? And they said, well, it's helped us with spam filtering so far, which is great because we've been able to reduce headcount. So given that it's already a company that was pretty lean, they're now employing fewer people.
And making it even more 0.
Yeah.
So the one thing I would add on that point, I think it's completely right for us to be concerned about more rapid job displacement than we've had in the past. But just getting back to the elderly care example, one of the fastest growing professions in the US is home health care aides. And one of the things that concerns me when I think about machine intelligence, I often think about being able to use it to plug in gaps where care doesn't currently exist. And so we're dealing with a situation of, that people are calling it the silver tsunami. So there are going to be a lot more elderly people that are going to need help. Obviously, there are issues with income inequality. And so there's going to be this massive gap of care. And so, I always wonder, how can we use machine intelligence to help close that gap, if even just a little bit, right? And so one of the things that kind of calls to my heart is the plight of elderly loneliness, right? And so never is an algorithm going to replace or even supplement the love that your actual family members and your friends can give you. But there's still a massive gap there, and this is one of the areas where I'm hoping to see more activity. But we saw examples of Microsoft created a system called Xiaoice, and then when deployed in the US went badly, but when deployed in China, led to these bots actually providing people with empathy and emotional support, even though people realized it was not a human. So in a lot of cases, people would say to these bots, and they're super rudimentary technologies, things like, I love you, and you're the only one who listens to me. And I'm throwing it out there. I know it's a bit of a contentious subject, but can we employ these bots to help deal with the elderly loneliness problem in any meaningful way? And so we hope to spend more time there and find entrepreneurs working on that problem.
I want to go back to the job loss question. There was a really interesting study that came out from Pew a month ago that asked Americans whether they think that the workforce is going to be, many jobs in the workforce are going to be automated, and 66% said yes, AI is going to have a major impact. And then they were asked what they thought would happen to their own job, and 80% thought that their own job would not be affected, which is proof that denial is probably more powerful than technology. But it raises the question of what is the extent of job losses? Is this kind of a slowly melting iceberg that that we won't notice, and then all of a sudden it will be gone? Are only parts of jobs likely to be automated and not whole jobs? I imagine you're in the parts of jobs and not whole jobs, Guru.
Yes, absolutely. So I'll tell you my view. First of all, this whole trend of technology improving how people do work is an age-old thing, right? For hundreds of years, we've had industrial revolutions of different kinds that have first automated things that we do with our muscles, and now it's automating some of the things that we do with our minds. And I think each of these is kind of like a technological progress that is going to improve our quality of life, improve effectiveness, productivity, all of those kinds of things, right? But I do want to look at every job as a set of tasks. In fact, this was what I was talking about in my lunchtime talk today as well. When you look at all of the professions we have, and there are thousands of professions, and you look at all of the tasks that each of those professions do as they go through educational journeys through their lives, there's just a massive number of tasks. And some of those tasks are going to be much better done by machines than humans. And some of those tasks are going to be much better done by humans than machines. So this idea of combining humans and machines is a very crucial one. In fact, the way I would approach it is to look at what tasks are more naturally done by machines. If you want to read 1 million articles a month, you wouldn't want a person doing that. Just like we had people who were computers in the beginning of the last century, and today we have machines doing the same job in banks and so forth. So I think that's the kind of change that's going to happen. But I'll let my colleagues.
Michael and then David.
Yeah, please.
So the first thing is we keep talking about blue collar jobs a lot. I think white-collar jobs, first of all, are going to get replaced, and I've heard this multiple times at the conference, at a way higher pace. Like these kids in college, even analysts coming up. But more importantly, if you look at the board there, I think the real thing people in this room should be worried about, that I'm worried about, is this over-the-top syndrome that's going to happen to all these corporations. Nobody is not susceptible to how AI is going to shift 1,000 billionaires to a different 1,000 billionaires in the next 10 years. I think I know 100 guys, men and women, who are in their 20s and 30s who are all on the track to being billionaires right now, who are doing everything from sensors business to better algorithms and trading, that I look at these brands, and the fear should be where you invest right now in any company you're in. If they haven't adopted some strategy, there's some 18-year-old or 28-year-old or 88-year-old who's going to be using this technology, and it's not going to be a little shift. It's seismic and going over the top. I mean, look at Facebook. I'm going to take Facebook, one of the most powerful companies in the world, or even Google. I saw Eric, is that right now what we've done with content is very finite. We've learned how to distribute content on the internet, search content, catalog content, right? But there's a little problem here. We're still doing all the work. What you want, what my kids want, is they don't want 100 channels. They want one channel for them, that Facebook, their sports, everything comes to them, and that it knows when to come to them. It knows when they want to watch a football game, or they want to see news, or they want to talk to Bob, or they want to know somebody's birthday. They don't want to do all this searching on hundreds of things.
David, what was on the job losses? And we'll get back to the future billionaires point.
I think to your point about the vision, the vision of developing computer algorithms that will make humans more effective at doing their jobs is a great vision. Surely this should happen. But keep in mind that most people, the bulk of the job market is, the bulk of the people on this planet Earth are not really involved with super high value jobs. They're basically doing relatively routine work, routine tasks, and these are precisely the kinds of tasks that computers are getting much better at doing. We all are aware of that there used to be a great profession, many great professions, but for example, bank tellers used to employ a lot of people, and that's was routine work, it turned out. that was better done by a machine. And that's not even AI, that's just a clunky machine. But still, in general, people preferred to use ATMs to a teller, which, by the way, is in some way very bad news because people voted with their feet. Instead of, you could say, well, okay, sure, you could go, if you went to a bank today and there was an ATM right here, and then a teller, not you, but some nice person right over there, and you needed some money, would you walk over to the nice smiling human being to get the money, or would you go to the ATM, put your card in, and take the money? So I think what's going on is that we are finding ways, using AI and other technology, to automate away the bulk of routine mental work.
And how worried does that make you as an American?
It makes me very worried because I think that if we can't find collectively, the people here in this room and elsewhere, higher value things to do with essentially this vast labor pool that's involved with routine mental activities, then their wages will stagnate or go down.
So the thing I'm still trying to figure out is, of course, there's going to be shifts away from certain categories of jobs to others. The thing that I can't figure out yet is this any different than the same shifts that we saw, for example, during the Industrial Revolution or whatnot? If you look back 150 years, a third of this country was either a farmer or a farm laborer. And now that is, I think, at about 1.5% right now, which is a really fundamental labor shift, well in excess of what's going to happen when self-driving cars become a reality. Mm-hmm. And so, it's clearly something we have to think about, But
the difference with the Industrial Revolution is that it set off a huge amount of economic growth, right? So the question is whether automation is similarly going to unlock growth or whether we've seen a lot of that already.
May I make a quick analogy? So let's replace the word human being in this conversation with a horse. And let me tell you what I mean. So around, before the internal combustion engine was invented and before, we had modern machinery, horses really were very much needed by the workforce. And they had great jobs. I mean, maybe they didn't like the work so much, but there were an awful lot of horses that were employed. They were making productive contributions to the economy. But the horses didn't, at the end of the day, they were very tired. And so first then machinery came around. And at first it looked really good for the horses because the horses, now they didn't have to haul the tractors through the fields. It was great. But it turns out no one ever came up with anything better, more economical for the horses to do. And even though there were all these horses around. And so now the horses aren't really needed. And so I agree, it's very optimistic, and we should be optimistic that we need to hope that we're going to come up with these great high-value productive things to do with the labor market. But I don't think we can just assume it's going to happen. It didn't happen for the horses.
So we are all horses.
Let me put it this way.
Horses.
Right. So if the first revolution replaced our muscles and the second one is replacing our minds, the question is, everyone says, oh, well, there'll just be another process where new jobs come along and everything's going to be fine, just like it was last time. But what's left after our bodies and our minds are made redundant? And I think, roughly speaking, the answer is our humanity is what's left. And let me explain that a little bit more. So really what's going on is that the jobs that are going to go away are the ones that use people as machines. And probably, in the long run, that's a good thing. I think most people here enjoy their jobs. Most people in the world probably don't enjoy their jobs. They're hard, they're dirty, they're unpleasant, they're repetitive, they're tedious, and so on. The question is, we all know that doing nothing is probably even less desirable than working in one of those jobs. So what will people do? I think what they'll do is what they do in Marin County. If you open the Marin County Yellow Pages, you don't find a lot of metal bashing and seed planting and stuff like that. You find personal therapists, aromatherapists, flower arrangers.
Isn't that LA?
Right? People, and parts of LA too, I'm sure.
You haven't automated flower arranging yet? Come on.
So people who are providing personal services to a small number of personal clients. That's not such a bad thing, but it's a big shift from the economy we have now. It's a total change in our education system. it's not quite clear how such an economy would function in terms of distributing value and status and economic power in a reasonable way. But I think it's urgent that we envision what that future is like and how to make it work. Because if we're going to have a transition plan from our current economy to some functioning future economy, we have to have a destination. You can't have a transition plan without a destination. So we need, I think, economists to work through this question, probably with science fiction authors. Economists, I have discovered, are not terribly good at inventing new economies. They're very good at analyzing an economic proposal, but science fiction writers are exact opposite. They're very good at inventing new economies, but of course, most of them wouldn't work.
Well, so on the science fiction strand of this conversation, there's two main concerns that come out about AI. One is the job losses, and the other is that there's going to be some intelligent AI system that is going to work against humanity and the interests of human beings. Do any of you take that seriously, the more sci-fi concern?
I don't. I think it will, for the moment and for the distant, look, we're creating the technology. So let's replace AI with nuclear weapons. So we invented this technology, and then we, as a global civilization, have spent a long time trying to make sure that we don't destroy ourselves, and have been very effective in putting regulations in place that have kept the world going. And so I think that indeed it is, in fact, I think it's more likely in the near term that we're going to invent various other kinds of incredibly dangerous technologies, more likely in the biological space.
Good. Here I thought you were being an optimist.
Well, I am an optimist because I think that society has a great way of working together to our human instinct is self-preservation, and we over the generations have recognized difficult problems and then have found ways to mitigate them. And so I would just one moment I would say that this is why I think it's very important to not try to slow down the progress of science by being afraid of it. And so the advances, you might say, well, look, this AI stuff could get out of hand. It's going to cause a lot of job loss. We don't know what we're going to do about this. I mean, that's totally the wrong answer, in my opinion. I think we just, as people here have been saying, have to prepare for the future. We have to be willing to talk about what the challenges may be ahead of time, and we shouldn't be accused of being pessimistic because we're acknowledging things we need to worry about in advance.
So I agree with you. I think we can't play defense against this kind of technology, or realistically any technology, and we don't necessarily know the answers to the question, does this pose an existential threat or will it ever? And given that we can't play defense, I think we're fundamentally obligated to do three things to just shape the best future we can shape. And the first of those is to ensure that we're nurturing machine intelligence for good. And so that can come in the guise of investing, that can come in the guise of nonprofits that are doing incredible things with data these days. The second piece of it is just ensuring a healthy balance of power. And so, one of the effects that we see here is, as you aggregate a larger data set and a larger team around it, there are these natural scale effects. And so we're seeing a whole bunch of organizations to pop up to help mitigate this, to help just democratize power within the AI realm. And so I volunteer with one of them. It's called OpenAI, and that's the basic thesis behind it, which is, how do we make sure we don't want to live in a future where someone has an AI that's 10,000 times more powerful than the next most powerful AI. We want to kind of democratize this and put this in the community as a whole. And then the last piece of that is, you alluded to this, is how do we ensure that there's proper regulation and standards around this and that the right parties are really participating in the discussion. And so, again, a piece of that is democratizing it and getting it out in the world. But another piece is, this technology is likely to move very, very quickly. Regulation tends to not move at that pace. And so how do we ensure that we front load this discussion? And so there are a whole bunch of initiatives here. a couple of my colleagues at Bloomberg Beta are doing something called the Future of Work Commission. And it's really around who owns this discussion, how can we front load it to the best of our ability to bring government together, private entities, economists, as you said. And I got this great idea now from Stuart, which is also including sci-fi writers. So thank you for that.
Michael, did you want to add?
I do believe in the dangers of AI, but the problem is I've already seen what people are doing with it. And you know, it's hard to say who's good and who's bad on this planet, but if you want to say there's good guys and bad fellows, the bad fellows also have this. And I've seen what can be done. And you know, I've used examples of cars and drones that I've already seen. Any of you go to TED conference have probably seen some of these demonstrations where, you know, teenagers have made it where they've already taken off-the-shelf drones and can turn them into an army with programming where they get smart, where if somebody took drones right now, using a little bit of technology, they could be swooping into a city with nothing to stop them right now if you made each one of them into a bomb. And with self-driving cars, it's all coming. Self-driving cars are basically weapons once you start programming them and can have coordinated attacks with these self-driving cars and even a Tesla where it has an automated thing. If you can hack into it, what can you do with those cars? So I think the issue is here not saying to slow it down, but we do need to keep working because other people are going to be working with this technology anyway. And so it's become a place, it's going to be an arms race. And we really need to, anybody who says we need to slow down because they fear it is making the wrong decision.
I think there's directors in the room who are getting ideas for the next kind of
I've seen this.
Hollywood blockbusters with the self-driving car fleets. Yeah,
Let me just add my thought on this. So going back to this discussion of artificial general intelligence that we had at the very beginning of this panel, I think this dystopian scenario that you're talking about is very much in that direction. And that's, as we all said, right? It's so far away. You know, there's so many very, very difficult things we need to invent. As technologists and as a realist myself, I would say that those are really, really far away in terms of this general purpose intelligence. But on the other hand, there are very specific machines that can actually help us do things without which we are actually going to be in worse shape than we are today, in my opinion. So, you know, just think about, you know, healthcare. We talked about healthcare quite a bit. I think we have enough data, but we do not use the data to make the right decisions today. And without these technologies, we actually will not be able to make the right decisions anytime soon, right? So we have to develop these technologies, in my mind, at a much faster pace than we are doing it today. And not just in the, you know, in all of the consumer applications that, you know, people tend to gravitate towards, but really in all of the professional applications where there are huge problems that we cannot solve without these technologies.
Stuart, do you want to add in on what are your biggest concerns?
Well, I'm interested by David's suggestion that it's about as dangerous as nuclear weapons, so everything's fine. I spend a lot of my time working on the nuclear test ban treaty, so developing verification technology for that. So when I speak to people who are biting their nails about the insecurity of the nuclear weapons situation right now.
So to take that analogy a little bit farther, what does containment look like in an AI scenario?
So I think that's a great analogy. And if you look at nuclear fusion researchers, 99% of what they do is containment, right? A while back, they figured out how to generate unlimited amounts of energy from nuclear fusion. It's no secret. It's called a hydrogen bomb. It's just not a very useful form of energy. And so they work on containing it. And that's what they do. That's what nuclear fusion research is about. And I think for AI, we need to think the same way, that what we're interested in is not unlimited amounts of intelligence that can achieve any objective of any kind. But we need intelligent systems that are provably beneficial, that understand what our objectives are as human beings. So their only objective as machines is to further the objectives of the human race.
Yes.
And I think, so just want to say something, another important characteristic, and what we have to have is humility in these systems. I'm thinking about creating a subfield called humble systems. but what it means is that the machine knows that it does not know what the human objective really is. So when
So just
someone,
more
so when someone
questions.
says, go fetch the coffee, the human doesn't mean go fetch the coffee. It does not mean that's the objective for the machine. Because if that was the only objective, then the machine would be obliged to assassinate any human being who came by who might take the coffee away while they were bringing it back, right? Because if that's the only objective, then you have to make sure that you achieve it. So when you say to a human being, go fetch the coffee, the person knows that's not what you really mean. What you really mean is, I would like some coffee. That would make me a little bit happier right now. And as long as it doesn't cost $200 for a cup, and as long as you don't have to run anyone over to get it, and so on, so on, so on. There's a long list of values that we all share that allow us to act with common sense. And the scenarios what people talk about, the sort of species-ending scenarios, are precisely machines that are optimizing objectives, but they don't have the full spectrum of human values. And so they adopt solutions that, after the fact, just like with King Midas, after the fact, we realize that wasn't what we really wanted, but it's too late because we're dealing with something that's more capable than we are, and so it doesn't necessarily make it easy to undo what it's up to.
David, did you want
Yeah,
to
I
add?
was just going to comment on that, which is very interesting, what you said, but I'm not sure I agree with the key premise where you were referring to a essentially core set of human values. And I think, in fact, that our planet is much more complicated than that, and there are vast debates that occur about what is humanity and what are our core values, and it's beyond the scope of this discussion. But the AI topic does kind of enter into play. So, for example, one could say that one of the great benefits, I know here in California, one of the great, people love their cars. People like to drive their cars, and they're beautiful. I can't believe it compared to the clunkers we've got in New York. And you go down roads in California, you want to put your convertible down, you want to drive down the highway, right? Well, what if we decide in 15 or 20 years that the self-driving car technology is great, the roads are too congested here in California, we could pack twice as many or 4 times as many cars, this is all true, onto the roads if we just get rid of the human drivers, which can't handle that level of stacking of the vehicles, and we'll turn the roads over to the automated AI-based driving. So now you're starting a big debate. It's like, well, who's this world for anyway? You say, well, and so ultimately, one of the things I'm most fascinated with in this whole broader AI discussion is it's really causing us to question some very basic concepts of our own humanity. And what is this world for? What is the utility function we are attempting to optimize? And this is something that I think we all can agree that we don't agree on.
So I want to
It's complicated.
I totally agree, David, with what you're saying. It's a very difficult problem, and precisely the making explicit of the values, the conflicts that exist, but also the commonalities. I think we all talk about conflicts, but in fact there are enormous commonalities among different groups of people within the US and different countries. We all like our left legs, but we don't usually talk about that fact because it's kind of obvious that we like our left legs. And in fact, there's just a lot more of that stuff.
Sure.
And what I'm really saying is not that the machine should be responsible for resolving the conflicts among humans, but at least let's get the machines to understand what we all agree on that we want. And then we can argue about the other part.
So I would like to end this session, and then I'd like to take one question from the audience. So if we can do this quickly. I want to end the session by getting the most provocative prediction that you have, that 10 years from now at Milken about AI, a prediction about AI, that you think will be true. So 10 years from now, if you're back on the stage, if you're invited back, what will be true about AI?
Well, I would like every professional on this planet to have a cognitive assistant or an AI to help them do their job.
Do you want it? Will it be true 10 years from now?
I think it can be, yes.
Okay, that's soon.
Yep.
Michael.
Extending the human age by using AI in personalized medicine, healthcare, pharma, that's something we haven't talked about, but it's going to be incredible in 10 years what we do with it in healthcare.
I think there'll be digital personal assistants. It's in some sense the complement of what Guru is suggesting for everyone's everyday lives. They'll be reading our email. They'll be listening into all our telephone conversations and reading our texts. They'll know enough about us that they can actually be helpful. So everyone will have the equivalent of a highly trained CEO's personal assistant, and it'll cost them 99 cents a month.
Oh, wow, you think we'll pay for it?
I think
As long as 99 cents.
traffic,
It's 99 cents if you want the privacy. Otherwise, otherwise all your data is going to be public.
Right. Very good.
David?
Well said.
traffic deaths will be reduced in half through the adoption of various kinds of automated aids and other AI-influenced technology in cars. It'll be a major, major, major saving in life.
So I'll have a little fun with this one. In 10 years, we'll be back on this stage debating whether or not we should legalize marriage to an AI.
Okay. Are you Japanese?
All right, I think there's going to be a couple people with microphones in the center. Do you mind just raising your hand if you have a question? Yeah, I think we have time for one question. Who wants to be the lucky one?
It's you.
Hello? Yeah. My question is around, you raised a very interesting point around containment. I'm a bit of a sci-fi nerd myself. And the central thesis of Asimov's books, at least when you're talking about robotics, is the 3 laws of robotics. And the tenet there is around containment. So is there an equivalent in AI where you put down a set of laws that allow you to govern, or that governs AI in the way it deals with human society?
We are lucky enough to have the man who knows about this on the panel.
Right.
Well, so Asimov's laws basically say you shan't harm a human. And if you had a self-driving car that was following Asimov's laws and you said, "Can you take me to the airport?" it would say, "No." Because it's too dangerous out there, you might have an accident, even given the best possible driving, so I can't take you to the airport. So Asimov's laws don't take into account the inevitable uncertainty about the real world, the fact that you always have to take risks and make trade-offs. And also, it doesn't define harm. And I think when we talk about human values and harm, these are just two sides of the same coin. So Asimov is really not solving the problem, but he's posing the problem. How can we define the process of governing machine behavior so that the results are provably beneficial? And I think there are three principles. One of them I already mentioned, which is that machine's objective is always to optimize human values, and we can argue about what those are. The second one is the humble principle. The machine knows that it doesn't know what human values are. And the third one is how the machines can learn about what human values are. And to a first approximation, I think this is done by observing the behavior of, to a large extent, the whole human race and the whole historical record of human behavior, which is, after all, the subject of almost everything we ever write about. And sure, there are people who are bad. There are people who have good intentions but do the wrong thing. But I think the whole record of human behavior and how people react to it provides an enormous amount of information about what it is we really want, as opposed to what we might think and say we want.
All right. Well, thank you to all of you for being such engaged listeners, and thank you to my panelists.
Thank you. Thank you. Great.